Hi, I'm Bresden O'Malley with my co-manager host, Rusty Tanton. Welcome back to the One-on-One. It's 2025, and we're back in season 2 with more deep dives, real talk, and the kinds of conversations that are going to make you think.
First off, a huge thank you to everyone who tuned in last year. Your support, listens, and messages mean the world, and we can't wait to bring you even more this season.
And if you're new here, welcome. The One-on-One is the podcast built for the people who keep the software industry moving. Our mission is simple: to create a platform where engineers, leaders, and tech professionals can have real, honest conversations about the work we do, the challenges we face, and the industry shifts shaping our future.
Joining us today is Jackson Stakeman, a solution engineer with one of the most unconventional career paths I've ever heard of. We talk about what happens when you pass peak developer, how to transition into solution engineering, and the fine art of giving customers what they actually need, not just what they ask for.
Oh, and there's a wild vending machine hustle in here, so let's get into it. Today, it is your one-on-one, Jackson. What would you like to talk about today?
I think it's interesting time to be in software, right? The late stage capitalism, the changing economy, perhaps the end of the information age, AI, code generation, agentic systems. What a fascinating time to be alive and to work in technology.
I mean, I think that's well said. I think it's a fascinating time. Actually, what are your thoughts on just the last 2 years of kind of really intense development within our industry?
Oh goodness. I think I can be a little bit grim. I think we've passed peak developer, at least the way in which we understand it today, right? I don't see that coming back. At least the way we currently think of it. I think some of those advancements are one-way doors that some companies are very happily signaling that they have moved through. And so I think with this comes opportunity, right? It's not necessarily the gloom and doom. It's just going to be different. I think programming is different. There's some meme, right, about the hot new programming language. It's called English, right? Thinking about some of these agentic systems, thinking about AI as new compilers, right? It's passe to think about memory assignment and writing C. Oh, who does that anymore, right? Maybe that's
Gross.
the way the code we grew up writing and getting paid for. That's what the Gen Alpha will think of us and our quaint little habits of closures and
With our
JavaScript
cobalts and our, yeah.
right. Dead languages like that, Dad, and you just
yeah.
wither away when they
When they say dead language. Speaking of that, Jackson, so I met you as a software engineer and watched you climb a little bit of a corporate ladder. Why don't you dive into your background just a little bit and how you've shifted in your own career?
Yeah.
Oh goodness, the answer to this question is probably a lot longer than you meant it to be. So I had this terrible habit of switching careers and industries like clockwork from a relatively young age. So I went from school to working in theater, technical theater, hanging lights and such, to then almost falling off a ladder and then being like, you know what? You know who isn't high in the air? People who make movies. They stay on the ground. Let me move out there. So then I moved to Los Angeles, went to film school, was working as a script reader until I realized most of the scripts are terrible and they're really, really boring. So then I quit that, came back east, and then worked in commercial photography for a while, which was having its own interesting, similar moment, right? The beginning of digital photography taking over at the commercial level. And most interestingly, stock photos. Stock photography becoming a thing was right as I was entering the industry, and so there was a lot of skepticism and curiosity about that, which feels eerily familiar today. There, I broke my shoulder moving a large piece of furniture in a catalog studio outside of Lowell, Massachusetts. Then moved back east, back west to Los Angeles. Finished school, the University of Southern California conveniently has a digital media program embedded inside of the film school. Famously, George Lucas, over a tuna fish sandwich, was like, "You should probably do that. Here's a bunch of money." And so they built a school. So I went there, added digital studies as a minor, which is great. Got really interested in media studies, some experimental content management systems, video remix, all these really cool, innovative things. And that sort of brought me into programming, right? Mostly as a way to make these academic or artistic ventures happen. It wasn't until later that I realized you could make more money by making boring things with these technologies instead. Um, so let's see. Food writer, food blogger in the pre-influencer area, traveled the country and the world doing drinks and food photography and writing. So that was fun. Some good trips to Beefeater, thanks Diageo, and some other big brands.
Nice.
Before a tree fell on my apartment and caved in the asbestos ceiling and ruined all my stuff, which sent me to New Mexico, where then I got a commercial driver's license and drove truck over the road for about 9 months as a
Okay.
long haul trucker, and then left that to go to grad school to get a master's degree in organizational learning and instructional technology at the University of New Mexico because it was relatively cheap and had technology in the name. And then turned that
Yeah.
into a job at the university, mostly to get tuition remission. And then from there, met my wife, had my daughter, realized children cost money, and you can't pay them in tuition remission. And so then I left to go into consulting and software development. After being good old fashioned software engineer, billable, working on some fun clients and some less fun clients.
Mm.
Worked with this one over here. I'm pointing. I have no idea which direction she will be.
It actually worked out. Like I'm looking
okay.
at it on the monitor and you pointed right at her. Dead on.
Yeah.
I figured I at least had some percentage of a chance. And then was hands on keyboard, head down developer for a minute. And then I noticed that when corporate folks came to visit the office, they would go out to lunch and they had expense accounts and cards. So it's like, hey, I know a great Thai place because I'm sure you'll pay for it. And then in the pursuit of free food, slowly started moving up my way to the corporate side of things, specifically through solution engineering, sales engineering, which I took a liking to. It sort of matched my personality, my desire for more free lunches, uh, and that led to what's been a fascinating career of almost 9 years now, working in solution engineering in some capacity for about the last 7 or so. So that's me. What happens when you apparently have a short attention span and like free food? And
nice.
So kids, that's all you have to do.
So, random follow-up question from your background. What is the worst screenplay you read when you were a screenreader?
The one that made me quit. It was Die Hard in the Statue of Liberty, and it was called Liberty. It was so bad.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Like, was this after the third one, or?
No, this could have been incredible, but it was also bad. And it was like, you had me. And as soon as I saw the log line, I was like, this is amazing. This is it. We're gonna buy this one. We finally found it. I've been reading 100 terrible scripts, and this is the one. And then I was like, how did you mess this up? It writes itself. Oh man.
I mean, because I hear that title and I think I would see that movie. I would pay for it. I would definitely watch that movie.
Right. Jean-Claude Van Damme kicking somebody over the top, being like, give us your wretched masses. No, nothing. It couldn't. Everything was right there. They missed all of it.
Oh man, what a missed opportunity.
My integrity stopped me. I gave it a terrible review because it was awful. You write book reports and nobody reads. So everyone imported young people from the East Coast to read for them and then write book reports called coverage. But then they didn't want to read the coverage. So then you would read your own book report to them. And you're like, what am I even doing? They're like, we need you to rewrite this so it sounds good, because this aging action star is interested in doing it, and we think maybe we can get Busta Rhymes to play the security guard. And it's like, nope, out the door. I'm
God.
done.
Busta Rhymes.
I had a
Oh
line.
man.
I came into film with like very commercial minded, looking to sell out, and apparently I did not know that my integrity had a line that low, and that was way below it. It was like, nope, can't, nope, nope, nope.
So, one of the things I love about working with you, Jackson, is maybe because you have such a diverse background in everything that you've done, and they're very unique, very entrepreneurial based jobs, I would say. Um, you always have an idea. Like every time we talk, it's like, what's the new idea? And I love having those conversations with you. And as a little baby developer, following you around, also trying to learn like what it was to work in corporate. We talked all the time about different schemes, and we were in this new office, and we decided to embody the an entrepreneurial spirit, which was one of our pillars at work, right? And we wanted to buy a vending machine because we didn't have one. So we figured if we could buy that vending machine, we would profit off of our fellow colleagues, but we'd stock really good foods and like really good snacks. That was our big thing. Um, and I just kind of wanted to talk to you about, and then that actually led to something kind of illegal we talked about, which was putting up fake parking.
I want to hear about
Parking.
that.
Yeah. We literally talked. So we had a very small amount of parking in front of our building. And so we thought if we put up fake parking meters, people would not park there. And if they did, they'd give us money.
Oh
Solid
my
strategy.
god.
It's really just a vending machine outside, but for parking spaces. That's all a parking meter is, right? It's just a tiny little state machine that you can put quarters into, which is
Yeah.
exactly what a vending machine is, if you think about it, right? No,
It's not so different.
they had forgotten to set us up with vending, and so we saw an opportunity and a solution. And young go-getters such as yourselves, who had a Costco membership, and it was like, people make vending machines their whole YouTube personalities now. I feel like we were ahead of the curve, right? Um, we were denied.
We were
And
denied.
human resources gave me a very inspiring speech about how my talents were clearly being wasted on supplying nerds with food. And certainly, I should put these efforts towards managing an army of developers and think of the margins that I could achieve. Should I do that?
I'm disappointed
Yes.
with how wholesome that story is. Like I was expecting something a lot sketchier and shadier.
Well, that's because she talked me out of it. My original plan was just to
Okay, this
like
sounds
have the
better.
machine appear, right? Like
We
Oh.
I got a key, I can get in here, and it was like, oh look, hey, we finally got a vending machine, and no one would know the wiser and be like, oh man, these snacks are so good, right?
Let's see, with a stolen vending machine, that does it, yeah.
Why even steal it? You can buy them off eBay for like $800.
Yeah, we were so close. I the reason we made a proposal instead? That sounds like me.
Yes, yes. Bransden is a very valuable resource. She was my anger translator, working with a client. Apparently, sometimes I get a little heated and sent inappropriate Slack gifts. People,
As one does.
yeah, who may or may not have, broken our experiments or erased some of our code without telling us. So apparently,
Yeah,
you send a house falling down to somebody else's channel. Sometimes they're like, "Who is this guy?
I
Who's this
forgot.
jerk?" So I like to keep it profesh. And so I was like, President, how do I say this in a more productive way? And then her anxiety, thinking about the future, translated it into less memorable communication. So I'm not convinced it was better. It was certainly less risky.
It
Yeah.
was less risky. Yes, it was definitely less risky. Um, but that still led to, you finding this kind of interesting role. And I don't think it's a role many people know actually exists. And it's something you can do, especially if you like solutioning. But I was hoping you'd want to talk a little bit about it.
I think it's all connected. It's the same idea, right? The sales engineering, solution engineering is about embracing risk, right? That as developers, what are the odds that you're going to deliver on that story you pulled? Really, really high, right? 100%. You might have to ask for help. Maybe it takes longer than the story points allowed, but you're gonna figure it out, like you or your team. In sales, you're gonna lose, right? Like you're not going to win every sales call. You're not going to convince every client that you talk to. In fact, it's like baseball, right? If you are above 50%, you are amazing. And so that's a different attitude, right? Like that takes, right, understanding and accepting failure, agreeing that that's part of the process in advance, and baking that into your understanding and your own self-evaluation. I think it can be tough for devs if you're not built that way. I think there's a solution. I don't have a course on YouTube yet, but if I did, there we go, another money-making opportunity. It would be craps for devs. It's really, really boring Dungeons and Dragons. Everything is 2d6. But I think it does a great job of teaching you risk, right? That it's interesting from programming perspective. There's a little bit of state on the board. You can be on, you can be off. Like there's some interesting situations happen. The math is just hard enough that you probably don't want to do it in your head, right? Like you get the close to the feelings. You're like, yeah, that feels about right. But doing the permutations, it's just slightly harder than you would want to do, and so it gets to feel like magic a little bit. And you can look it up later and then be like, oh, that's what was actually happening, and then come back to the casino and then learn again. You win and lose together as a group with other people. Craps is a fantastic game. Everybody should play craps. Not all the time, but like
But like
have
once in their
have a
life,
craps
they should have
yeah,
a crapped experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair.
I'm sure you need a disclaimer now. Like, if you have a gambling problem, please do not play. Like, there's certain personalities and
Uh,
clearly some people who should not play craps, but I haven't met them yet.
I don't think craps is like the normal game for those with a gambling addiction.
Yeah, like
I don't
everybody
know.
starts with like blackjack and like poker. I'm like, no, craps, dice.
I feel like if
It's
you're ambitious enough, you can get addicted to just about anything. So like craps
Uh,
could craps definitely falls in that. I could see somebody getting addicted to craps. I don't know.
that's fair. I'm addicted to D&D, so that does happen.
same, same game. Just write the story. If you DM'd a crap table, that would be amazing. If you were just like, all right, what's the armor class? Do we hit? Everyone would be so confused, but you would be so happy. And just, who can put a price on that?
That's right. Yeah, good
That is
stuff.
fair. Okay, so solutions engineer. Basically, you're paired with a salesperson,
Yep.
and are you like, what are you bringing to that conversation when you're trying to get a sale?
Bringing everything. You get all of this.
Does
Uh, so I
it
mean,
work?
it depends. Different organizations do things in different ways, right? The traditional sort of sales solution engineer role is the demo guy, right? Because most companies are SaaS companies or some product, right? So that you're like, here, I'm going to listen to you and what your company does, and like, go notes, but I'm going to show you the same demo that I prepared anyway, because I don't have enough time to actually customize it for you that much. And let me show you the happy path through a bunch of things and answer your questions and be adept with this tool, and then have it be so easy for me that certainly it would be so easy for you. And can't you imagine your life with this thing now, right? And so that's most folks. For us, for me, I work in the professional services space, so we very rarely have things so polished to demo, and so it's really about understanding what you care about, understanding what problems you have, why nobody wants to talk to a professional services company, right? So there has to be some reason that you've reached out and talking to a seller and then you're dragged along to the call with them. And so you got to figure out that reason. You got to figure out what's going on with their lives, their company, with their product, with their process. And the tool that we use, or the tool that I've grown up to use, are questions, right? So asking good questions, questions that both show you that you understand things, questions that answer the details that you would need to actually build a solution. But then sometimes that's not really what that question's about, right? Sometimes the question is softer, or uh, a way for me to talk about a story later, right? I'm just trying to build a segue, and so uh, armed only with questions and short periods of time, you need to figure out, hey, are we a good fit? Is this is there a real solution here? How can we present it in a way that it's going to resonate and make sense to them in the same way that it makes sense to us? How do we get together on the same side of this problem so we can solve it together? Which is really, when you're looking for services, when you're looking for a partner, that's what you want. And so you audition for it together, being like, hey, is this going to be a good partnership? If it's not now, it probably isn't going to be later. And so we should both stop wasting each other's time. And so that's largely what the job is. There's details and stuff after. You make so many slide presentations. Oh my goodness. Google Slides, PowerPoint, all day long. You help write SOWs, you help craft teams, you act as an API to translate between the technical and the non-technical, try to bring everybody together. You tell the story of your encounter, of the company, of the problem, of your solution, to as many people in words and manners in which they would best understand them, right? And to sort of bring everybody together on the same page when they're not on the same page, right? That's the sort of a little bit of elastic magic that happens in the solutioning space.
Yeah. So we know like the oldest story in software engineering, right, is sales, committing dev to building something that it really is not necessarily capable of building practically, like for either for the
Sure.
money or for whatever. How do you try to help, stave that off? And how do you kind of bring those folks back down to earth?
With a heavy stick, knowing where people live and threatening them, being I honestly, that is rarely the problem. I think the bigger
Interesting.
problem is uh, giving them what they asked for doesn't solve their problem.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really hard to convince somebody to be like, I know you just met me, and I know you know way more about your company and your business than I do. I can show you what you asked for. Both of us are going to be miserable at the end of if we do that. Really, we should be talking about this. Really, the problem is somewhere else. It's not. There's no amount of developers, doesn't matter how smart they are, none of them are going to solve this problem that you have of not actually knowing what your customers want. Really, this is a product problem. Really, this is a design problem. We can code around it. Who cares? Why? Let's stop that.
That's
Right.
legit.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, we can finish that in a month. And it'll be like, there's no way you can finish that in a month. You can't even describe that problem to me in a month accurately. Leave. What? Get out of here. So you say that on the call, and right, your honesty will be rewarded, maybe not with a win, but maybe karmically. Maybe the next time the seller won't try that because it'll be like, oh, he totally blew me up the last time I tried to do this, right? And so you gotta you gotta think multiple roles,
There you
right? It's
go.
not it's you gotta think the long game.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a really difficult position to be
It's
in.
impossible, and yet necessary. And so I think that's what's fun about it, right? The doing necessary impossible things means very rarely is everyone equally happy. Right?
Yeah, that's how you've done a good job at the end of the day if everybody is a little bit miserable, right?
Right? You just got to move it around. It can't be the same people
Yeah.
being the same amount of miserable all the time because then you're a bully, right? No, you gotta smear it, um,
Balance.
right? Something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. So, I'm curious about some stories of like really tough sales calls that you've been on. Um, and I guess conversely, really good ones, but like what is a losing scenario that you've had to be a part of?
Oh man. Um, well, one that's really common is when, like we were talking about before, when you know that they don't understand the problem that they're having, and you
Yeah.
know that you don't really understand the problem that you're having, and trying to work through that together, where you're not necessarily trying to do it for free, right? It was like the amount of time I would have to put into talking to this to prove to you that neither of us understand this would cost more than you're willing to pay.
Yeah.
And so that means this is probably not great. But then everybody else would be like, well, what do you mean? Certainly we can figure it out as we go. And it's like, we might be able to. I don't know that we will because of problems X, Y, and Z, or right, and certainly not in this time horizon, and then certainly not before everybody gets frustrated and starts to like hate each other, and then they'll slow down. And so right? That like you're more tolerant of that in mechanics, right? And it's like there's a code on my thing, and it was like I don't know what it means. Mechanics like how would I know what it means? I need to plug my computer into it and tell
Yeah.
me what it is. And it's like, and that's $120. It's like I gotta pay you $100, and what if it just means that my gas cap was loose? And it's like, well, then you should tighten your gas cap and see if the
Yeah.
light goes away. Right? Like that's better use of both of our times, right? So yay. But building that rapport with somebody, especially on the phone, where somebody who has a commission riding on you not doing that is interesting. Especially if you don't have a long relationship with them, and they know that you'll get them when it counts, and let the small ones go away. So that happens a lot, right? Which is one of the reasons why I think even with all the anxiety about AI and all this other stuff, that part seems pernicious enough where like figuring out what the heck we want to do and what the problem is and what the solution might be, that seems like we're going to have that problem for a very long time. Now the fact that like we can now program throwaway code for it to prove it out really quickly, that's really exciting to me, right? Being able to like go down all of the wrong ends for $2 worth of API calls. Um, what an amazing treat. Maybe we'll start doing stuff faster than we used to when we do know the right problem. That's good too. That just means we'll have more software solving more problems, right? Things getting cheaper, things getting faster usually means there's going to be more of it, not less, right? I wasn't great at econ, but something about a curve and supply and demand tends to do some of those things.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, you should talk to smarter people with PhDs than me for that kind of stuff.
You dabble in enough
I mean, I know an economist, but
offshoots.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I've not been an economist. All those kids who were good, they all went into like investment banking in school, and so yeah, they were insufferable, and really fun to hang out with after they got bonuses. So,
So all this happened from wanting free lunch.
yeah, what doesn't? I mean, I think the freelance is very true and real for me, but I think there's an important idea in there too that like I think this helps with solutioning, but I also think it helps with life. And I know there's people who will disagree with me. And my wife is a neuropsychologist, and I'm not sure that like brains actually work in the way in which I'm about to describe. So she'll probably open the door and hit me with something if she's listening. Um, Great solutioning gets to think multiple things at the same time, right? You get to play with, quantum superposition a little bit and being like, what if this was true? What if this was not true? What if these priorities were in this order and also in this order? Because they are for somebody. And if you can hold all of that in your head at the same time and just like let it vibrate, I think that's where creative solutions to things come from. And so I think a great way to practice this is to right, have like a main quest and a side quest at the same time, right? So if your goal is to, I want to get promoted and make more money, yes, but also I want to get as many free lunches at the same time as I'm doing this. And now it's a fun game. Now you get to, right, do things that you wouldn't have necessarily done because they support one goal and not the other, right? And in the end, since everything is so interconnected, I think it makes you see more possibilities than you would before. If you only have one goal, if you only have one point of view, you can be pretty direct and pretty closed off in the name of efficiency. Of course, you do that. But if you have multiple ones, that's inherently inefficient, right? Like there is no great way to plot between those two things at the same time. And so embracing some of that inefficiency leads to more interesting pathing, which then, the opportunity to add even more side quests and explore even more and really understand the problem space just because you were trying to eat because you bounced around in it, right? And all of a sudden now you know more and you have more context than you would otherwise, right? I'm sure there's an AI related lesson in there somewhere. But I'll leave it as an exercise for the reader to find. Or listener? How do podcasts
Yeah.
work?
Well, so
How do
we've
I
got a
know?
YouTube, we've got an audio. Some people do audio, some people do video. Um,
You're on
it,
YouTube.
yeah, we are. Believe it or not.
Should
Yeah.
have done more research before. Hmm.
It's right
I
there.
wanted to catch you off guard,
Yeah,
Jackson.
this
Yeah.
is very unprofessional of me. Newsletter would have looked all
It's
of
all
you up on
good.
LinkedIn. We would have, done some market research, a little bit of account planning, looked at your, revenue targets
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the
yeah.
year. If you're on an upward trend in
Or,
viewership or down, mentioned that I have a lot of influential followers that, of course, will come
yeah.
to your podcast
Drill
because
us
of
on
me,
our
and so that's why I'm a great
KPIs. Yeah.
guest. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't I don't know that we've ever thought of any KPIs for this podcast.
What do you mean? They're right there. The platforms are
People
deterministic. They're
people
giving you
listening.
KPIs.
Yeah.
Yeah, more listens, more hours watched.
Yeah, yeah.
This is true. But we also, how do you put a KPI around a good time?
Easy.
Yeah, I
MSAT
mean,
surveys.
no, because
Was this podcast episode the best? How did you feel on a scale of 1 to 10 about this podcast episode? How likely would you be to recommend this podcast to a friend? Right? Like, there you go, easy. Make a dashboard, put in Power BI. You're off to the races.
there you go.
And that's him solutioning.
Solution.
See, there it is.
Yes.
Done.
Nailed it.
Done.
No, but like, what a great activity to be like. What are we even doing here? Is to be your job all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like, huh? Why? Really? Why? What would that do? If this was true, what would that mean for you? If it wasn't, ooh, if this doesn't happen, what happens to you then? Right? Oh man, that sounds awful. Yeah, we should probably do this then. Jeez. The alternative
Yeah.
seems terrible. Right, you get to do that. You get to be insufferable, like professionally, all the
Yeah.
time. I don't. The solutioning is wonderful and terrible, right? That it's both. It's everything, everywhere, all at once, and nothing, nowhere, not at the same time. I don't know what the opposite of that is. I should have paid more attention watching that movie. They did not go to USC, so whatever.
No, I mean, so what you were saying, it reminded me a way that I will trick myself sometimes is if there's a book I really don't want to read or some other piece of literature I really don't want to read, um, I'll find something I do want to read and I'll read it like voraciously, and then I will immediately pick up the other thing. So this gets into all the context switching you were talking about, and like how, and the big picture, and like, I don't know, just your wife being a neuropsychologist, you said,
Mhm.
and it just got me thinking about how the ways I go about tricking my brain sometimes. Um, and I don't know, do you have any ways that you, like, going into these sales meetings, do you have any sort of like patterns you follow as you're going through and having to go through and do these presentations that might sort of help you as you go along?
I prefer pure chaos. It keeps everybody on their toes. It's a more productive environment. No, the context switching is onerous, right?
Yeah.
Like the devs always complain about it, breaking out of your flow. And part of solutioning is agreeing to never have that ever again. Right? You have no continuity, right? You're working and talking about radically different things 1 minute to the next. You're late for one bit of context because you're wrapping up the context in the first one, and then you switch and be like, where are we? What is happening right now? And so good note taking, I think, helps with that. I am fascinated by personal knowledge gardens and things like Obsidian and like tools like that. I do not use them effectively. I just like look at them wistfully. Instead, I have like half-eaten sandwich wrapper with a note written on it, or the scribble here, or a Kindle Scribe with this. There's no affiliate links here. Don't buy a Kindle Scribe. They're fun for reading, but writing on them is obviously an afterthought. No shame. It's a great idea. They just didn't finish it. Where was I? See, context. Having
Context
threads
switching,
talk.
yeah.
Right, context switching. We just did it. See, as an
Well
exercise
played.
See?
for the
Yeah.
reader.
Nice work.
Right? It's all theater. Uh,
All of it.
in color coding stuff, using geography on the screen helps me to being like, yes, this, or even in real life meetings, like the person near the door said this, like the sound came from the left when you heard this. I am a big auditory learner. My wife's and daughter are visual. They have like photographic memories. I have a more phonographic memory. I'm much better at like listening to remember. Um, I'm very nearsighted, and we didn't know that when I was a kid. So I like couldn't see the board until I was in fourth grade when we finally got classes. So it never occurred to me that other people could see it. Right? You just remember what they said and be like, oh yeah, she said that word when her hand was over there. That must be what's scribbled on the wall. She should really write bigger. Was my thought as a kid. I thought it was normal, right? Because being nearsighted, you can read. You never think your eyesight's bad. You just don't know that other people can see further than you. And so that's my approach, is to try to make up for all my physical and mental shortcomings by using a variety of tools and try to establish a little bit of rhythm that helps switch the context for me. But I also think, counterpoint, having that chaos, having the drag from one meeting to the other creates connections to being like, this has something really familiar to something I talked about an hour ago in a completely different context. But it turns out everybody has the same containers in Heroku that are about to hit end of life, right, to come in March. And so, we should probably address that. And there's probably some efficiencies that could be gained there by bumping the version of this, even though the last person I talked to was, in a education company and you're in a transportation company, but since you both acquired software you didn't really know much about the same time ago when this was seemed like a good idea before Salesforce bought them, here we are, we're all in the same situation. So like I think there's weird happy accidents that come
Yeah.
from collisions from context switching that you'd miss otherwise. So don't ever make anything too smooth. Don't make everything make it too easy. That's my fear with AI tooling, right? The bad things happen if it's too easy, right? The from having played with it and working towards some AI generated solutions, it really feels like Bresden's on your team and you have to read her pull requests all the time. You're like, what crazy thing is she going to try to sneak in here next? And that's a really different mode of being an editor, being a reader, when you're used to solving problems by hands on your keyboard and writing and thinking through them. And now you're just sort of considering them, right? And like even how much, if you didn't write it yourself, how much context can you hold in your head just from reading random bits of not connected code, right?
Yeah.
That's a different exercise. That's a different muscle. And so I think that's maybe where the future of programming is headed, is more pull request reviews from sources you don't necessarily trust. Right? Just like we used to when you had a room full of junior devs. And you were like, oh God, what are they doing now? No. And maybe that's the past becomes the future again. It's just um, quieter.
That's fair. It is a tool, right? So those who learn to use the tool efficiently are going to do all right. Um, so it really depends on your ability to utilize the newest technology.
Right, but who would have thought that like the people who read are better than or worth more than the people who write? Now,
I'm so
revenge of the
excited.
script reader. Take that, Liberty. I've
Exactly.
read worse stuff when I was yeah. So.
No, I think that's a good point. I think what I've discovered is hard is explaining my problem well enough to get the proper answer back. Like there really is a lot of skill involved with utilizing it correctly.
Hmm.
If you don't know how to talk to it and prompt it and exactly how to ask it what you need, like you're actually going to spend a lot of time trying to,
Oh my
piece it all
gosh.
together and
Yeah.
We joked about this with one of our past guests, Christian, a lot. That how like there's going to be an actual job for prompt engineers, and in fact, I've seen it now. Like I've actually
Yeah.
seen positions where people just sit around and talk to AIs all day. Apparently now.
That's what we did before. We just talked to a compiler. It's just a new
Yeah.
compiler, and we just don't have good conventions around the programming languages for prompting because it's not programming, it's a prompt. But I mean, it is. You can pretend, right? I think Google has some good resources there, some of which might be lying around my desk somewhere if I could do a quick flourish like this, right? Of frameworks for producing things, but they all feel like magic, right? Like you have these like black box non-deterministic systems that don't always do the same thing. You give them the same prompt, like you're just casting spells, right? Like
It
that's all you're
all
Yeah.
doing.
comes back to D&D.
Everything is D and D if you think
It
about
really
it.
is. Well, it really is. Everything is a deterministic dice roll. I felt like when I worked with you, Jackson, I was like your sidekick. And it was
Oh,
very like every time you'd be like, okay, I got a new idea. I was so ready to execute on that idea. And we did a lot. We started so many clubs. We were always like trying to get passive income.
Oh man.
and now
See.
we're both rich. It totally works.
We
Right.
went far, and I
Yeah.
do attribute a lot of it to you, Jackson. And then I watched you climb the corporate ladder, and I was like, well, now what?
It's that easy. They have better food, right?
Yeah.
They do. And then I followed, and I followed in the wrong direction. I got talked into a role that didn't work for me.
I told you not to.
You did, and I didn't listen to you. It's my fault. It's one time I didn't listen to you. I
See.
shouldn't have listened. I really believed that I was gonna do so much good in that role. I didn't do anything. It was sad. I learned a lot though.
There
See,
you
you
go.
did something.
Huh.
Yes.
You did
So
it
many
for
things.
you. You didn't, maybe not for everybody else, but you got something out of it.
I made great friends.
Oof.
Searing
Woof.
indictment.
Yeah, I in preparation for this, I re-listened to the episode you did with Toby,
Mm.
who of all your guests looks the best in overalls, hands down.
Oh, hands down.
Solid contributor. And what struck me, I love Toby, is how earnest he was. I was like, oh man, mine's gonna just sound so hollow and empty. And that guy is such like a good guy, and he like believes in things. And meanwhile, and I'm like, remember, kids, if you believe in anything, you've already fallen for something. Right? Cynicism. It's the only way to live your life.
I will
Uh,
say that whatever happened to Toby, he definitely had his like beliefs reignited where he works now because he got crushed by RSI there for a minute, and he definitely was much more cynical, and then he left, and he's just he does believe in the process and
And
and how
that's
it
that's
works.
amazing, right?
Yeah.
No, for those who are interested in sales, right, the fighting against cynicism is important. Just don't fight too hard against it. You need some, right? Like, because you're signing up to lose frequently, right? You have doors slammed in your face. Your people tell you, well, you didn't understand me at all, and this, and like, all that's true. And you have to be able to take all of that in stride and use it as fuel and like, but negative results are results. That's important too, right? That's how
Mm,
science works, right? So you need to embrace the whole, right? You're gonna roll again. You're supposed to lose sometimes. You're also supposed to win sometimes. So if you're not winning ever, you're right. You should look at that too. Um, but that's, I think that can be hard, right? Fortunately, I had a great mentor who, in a one-on-one to me, was like, you gotta, this part's hard. There's no way to like coach you through it. You're either gonna find that you're like okay losing sometimes, or you're not. And if you're not, let me know, and we'll find something else for you to do where you're not gonna lose. I was like, oh, that's heartwarming. Thanks. But it was good advice, and it was really true. And so I've benefited. In all seriousness, I've benefited greatly from great mentors and from great one-on-one conversations. From really smart, really passionate devs to corporate leaders to CTOs to consultants to sellers. Um, Listening to great advice come unsolicited is one of the best parts of my job and sort of the career path that I've had. Being a serial beginner, I think helps prepare you for being bad at things. It helps prepare you for understanding that improvement is possible and expected and natural. But that's a hard lesson if everything's been easy for you. So I try to make sure my daughter gets crushed at a board game every once in a while uh, to help share that strong upbringing for her, so she's not
Yeah.
spoiled bitter.
No, I never let my kids win at Mario Kart. And like,
Oh, she gets big mad when I beat her in Mario Kart. Oh
well,
man,
but you
yeah.
know what? It made them better because now my 13-year-old can regularly mop the floor with me at Mario Kart. But like, it took him years of taking the L.
um,
Yeah.
I- those are amazing closing thoughts, and I do have to say that it's really hard for me to imagine you beating your daughter at anything because your daughter is so smart. I would like to believe that you crush her at some board games, but I do see her figuring it out very quickly.
Oh yeah, no, Carcassonne, she got way too good at that real quick. I was like, what? What is happening? No, yeah. She's a strategic thinker from age 9. So I am terrified for the world for those of you who have to live in it when she comes to power. I'm sorry, I tried.
It's been very obvious since she was like 2.
Yeah, she bossed you around. She came into the
Oh,
office.
she had me
I
wrapped
choose this
around her
one.
finger.
I make her my champion. Defend me against him.
I
Um,
remember. That is a true story. Yep. No. Well, good luck with your daughter. Continue to try to beat her. It does help, to your point, Rusty. My dad never let me win at chess ever.
Yeah.
And I just thought I was a terrible chess player until I played other people. And then I was like, "Oh my god, this whole time he was training me."
Well, it
So,
doesn't help too. My oldest, he's the biggest shit talker in the world. And um like he beat me at chess from the beginning. He's like a like not prodigy
wow.
level, but like he's solid. Like he beat his instructor at school and stuff like that.
oh,
Like he's good. And he lets me have it every single time. And I mean, like I'm sitting here thinking I have great moves going, and he's beating me in like 3-4 moves sometimes. And like, I don't know. Anyway,
That's
he's good.
impressive. That is awesome. Jackson, thank you so much for joining us.
my pleasure. Now I'll watch more than one episode of your podcast.
Well, thank
Sounds
you.
great. Opinions expressed on the one-on-one belong only to us and our guests, not to any of our respective employers. Does this platform call to you? Do you need a one-on-one? You can find us on the web at theoneonone.show. That's THE1ON1.show, where you can sign up to be a guest. We also love listener messages. You can email us at contact@theoneonone.show or leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/theoneononepodcast. Send us your comments and questions, and we may respond to your message in a future episode. You can also find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube by searching for The One-on-One. Please rate and review us on those services. It helps us out a lot. The One-on-One wouldn't be possible without listeners like you and a fantastic community of people who help us in ways large and small. Special thanks to Cameron Cooper, who helps us with marketing, Michael Ducharme, who created our bumper music, and Elena Sage, who's been a huge booster since day one. Thanks for listening.